Hi everyone. So I just want to talk about deep work and give you a primer on that module. So this can be used as a companion to kind of read it. So essentially, the idea of deep work is closely related to flow state, and a flow state is something where we're kind of so involved in the activity that we lose track of time, and we're kind of just like totally involved. So we experience flow states in many different ways while playing, while dancing, while playing instruments, kind of any activity where we're completely involved in the activity that we're doing. And so the idea is how do we do that while we're doing work? And kind of that's very closely related to this idea of deep work. So most of the time we do work to avoid consequences imposed by others. That's the way that we're initially socialized on how to do work. In school, it takes the form of teachers giving us grief for not doing our homework. As we grow older, you might miss a kind of fail exam. Um, and when it comes to work, you might not get promoted, or you might get fired in the worst case. So these are all activities that we're doing out of a sense of kind of fear of the consequences that come if we don't do that, right? And the idea of approaching the work from a place of joy and flow is that what if we could kind of immerse ourselves into the same states that we get into while kind of doing any of these creative activities while we're doing work, right? Um, so that's the idea here. Um, So it's the practice of doing cognitively challenging work in a way that allows us to enter a flow state, a state of deep focus where we're fully engaged in a task requiring mental effort, creativity, and skill. And this is different from crisis mode that we just talked about. And why is it kind of that we should do this? First is that deep work makes hard work really enjoyable. We are always seeking out flow states. And so if we can do get flow states while trying to do cognitively challenging work, then that's really fun and it makes work inherently enjoyable. Um, it produces very high quality, enduring results. Normally, when you're doing deep work, you're stretching your brain. You're not just answering emails or something like that. It's some cognitively challenging work, and often creativity or unique kind of contribution will come out of states of deep work. And so, if you've written books or most books, films, architectural plans, plays, talks, code and design other outcomes of deep work, and these are kind of pieces of work that have enduring value. And so that's a really nice side effect is that we get work that is really valuable. Um, yeah, deep work, if once we get into this, we kind of pursue it just for its own sake, and then we no longer rely on external circumstances for us to do cognitively challenging work. It leads to an unfair advantage because if you can do it, you naturally do more of it. And, most people just will wait for the crisis, do it at the last moment, and not be able to do more than the bare minimum that's required of them. But if you are getting flow states, then you can do a lot more work that's kind of very high value than your peers. And that's kind of really awesome. Um, yeah. So how do we do it? And there's a bunch of books that talk about kind of how important deep work is. The most important, I mean, the biggest one is just called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And so there's a lot more literature out there about why it's important. But let's talk about how. And so the way we do it is it's a formula. So deep work is time spent times intensity of focus. And so there's two things we need to kind of work on. One is how much time we're spending in these kind of states. And the second is how intensely we're focused during those times. Um, so in time spent, the main thing that's going to happen is you're going to have a task that's really hard to do. And you are going to kind of, your brain is going to panic at some moment because it's really hard. And it's going to want to like flee into distraction. It's going to want to pick up your phone and check Instagram or whatever your digital drug of choice is. Um, and so that's like a big kind of issue. Um, yeah, we can add rituals and routines. A lot of this is covered in execution. Um, Also, if you want to read more about this, it's extensively covered in books like Indistractable by Nir Eyal. It's also in Atomic Habits. So just these cycles of how we do it, the reward kind of, cycle that they you guys talk about. So you can learn more about that there. We cover this mostly in the context of execution. So if you've done execution, the idea of time blocking and having specific kind of tasks that we want to do, that's gonna kind of, and the timer and all of that stuff, that's basically to help us kind of, create time for the deep work. The thing that I talk a little bit more about here is intensity of focus. So imagine your brain is a mental muscle, and doing cognitively challenging work is like lifting weights or doing some very strenuous activity. Um, a lot of us don't have very developed mental muscles. We just don't have the ability to focus. And if you don't have the ability to focus for some period of time, it becomes very hard to do deep work. Um, and yeah, we're just, brain isn't in a state where it can focus. Um, Regardless of why this is the case, you can train your brain, and you can think of it as a mental muscle. Yeah, one evidence for this kind of idea is that people hire from universities with really competitive exams because they know that you can put in the hours and focus and get through very technical and oftentimes dry material and make sense of it. So they know that your mental muscle is strong. And then this ability, they also know, maybe not explicitly, but they know how to transfer to everything else. Um, yeah. And so let's talk about a few ways of doing it. One, yeah. So basically, what you're trying to do is like make your brain work hard. The way that you train your muscles is you overload them. And so you want to do the same thing here. One really fun exercise is memorizing a deck of cards. So there's a whole way on how to do it. Um, yeah, but basically the idea is you should be able to take a pack of cards, shuffle them, see all of them for some period of time, and then be able to say kind of what that order was. This is a really fun exercise, and it's a real feat to be able to do this. Yeah, I honestly haven't done all 52. I can do 26, and I haven't practiced in a while. But this is a really kind of interesting way to train your muscle and also see kind of how much you're able to focus, because it will become very uh, quickly apparent how strong your mental focus is. Morning pages. This is an exercise that has very many kind of upsides, and again, it's documented in this. But essentially, again, you'll have to just like, it's basically writing 3 pages of freehand writing, stream of consciousness in the morning, and there's a few benefits to this. But it does kind of help you focus and not get distracted as well. Meditation generally will help. I don't have instructions here yet, but they'll come. Reading is really good. Reading requires you to focus, and unlike watching videos, reading is an active kind of sport. You can't read unless your brain is actively engaged. And so it is challenging. Again, you may not have a very strong mental muscle right now, but these are a few kind of strategies that we can use for that. Writing is another one. Writing is maybe the hardest kind of activity there is because it requires you just to think and kind of be very present with that. And there's not a lot of external kind of stimulus when you're doing that. And so that's probably one as well. Which, yeah. Yeah. There's a few other kind of things. You can find your own stuff here, like do what seems fun to you. But yeah, just strengthening your mental muscle so that you can increase your intensity of focus is a big kind of part of doing deep work. Even if you allocate time, if your brain is just like not in a space where you're able to focus for half an hour, these kind of things will help. Again, you can find a lot more examples of this online. You can ask GPT, but just be aware that you do need to train your mind to be able to focus for extended periods of time. Um, right. One other part is how do you learn to resist temptation? Um, Whenever you get to like challenging work, your brain is going to cry out for an escape because you're like making it work really hard. So much like if you're training, you will want to give up, but then your trainer or someone will tell you, keep going, and you'll find that you actually can. Um, and so, yeah, there's a few ways to do this. Yeah, there's a few ways to do this. If your brain is not used to discomfort, then it's going to be want to escape. So just be aware that there's a lot of like distractions out there that people are actively engineering, and learning to resist these is a big part of training our brain to kind of be able to do this cognitively challenging work. There are a number of ways to do this. They're very well documented. And again, the books that I talked about, the Nereal's Indestructible and Atomic Habits as well. You can delete apps, mute notifications. I think that's a big one. I don't have any notifications on my phone. Not sleep with our phones is a big one, though I've been failing at this recently. Put our phones away when we're trying to work. Again, not doing that right now, but yeah, even the little ping, even just the little notification will kind of throw you off. Um, this is a lifelong pursuit. and they're just becoming more and more addictive. Here are some ways you can do it. Um, you can figure out what kind of works for yourself. But if you're constantly getting notifications, news notifications, Instagram notifications, and you're very used to checking them all the time, it's like eating a bunch of junk food, and then your kind of workouts aren't as impactful. Similarly, if you're trying to build your focus, this kind of stuff is just like digital junk food, and so it's gonna kind of hamper your ability to be able to focus. So think about that, and if that's a big issue, then kind of take care to address that as well. There's no generic kind of advice I have here. It'll be specific to you and what your things are. This kind of works well for me. But yeah, you can take a look at those books and figure out kind of what works for you. But yeah, learn to resist distraction. There's actually a really interesting point when you're doing deep work sessions. It's when your brain is like mentally, like, let's say you've been working, you did get into some kind of flow state, and let's say it's been 20 minutes, your brain will be like, okay, now I'm done. And that's the point where one would have normally gone and checked one's phone or done something else distracting. And at that moment, if you see the timer and you're like, no, brain, I wanted to keep focusing. So you kind of push through that barrier. That for me is like a really kind of important moment where I'm like, okay, I see the limitation. This is where my brain naturally wants to give up, but I'm going to make it work harder. Um, I think that's a really like fun, like it's such a great moment actually when that happens, because that's when I would have normally stopped working, but then I'm able to keep going. And often those times when you're pushing your brain, that's when you get like a lot of work done, because you already have all of the, short-term memory that you need to be able to do the task. Like your brain is like very in a good state to be able to do that at that time. So then when you can push it and you get another kind of 20, 30 minutes out of it, it's such a great experience. Yeah. Okay, so that's the idea of deep work. So deep work is when you're doing cognitively challenging work and getting flow states. So when you're losing track of time, when you're becoming very focused and it's kind of fun, that's a deep work session. The way that we do deep work is kind of spending a lot of time doing it and being really intensely focused. We talked about how we do both of those things. Time spent through the execution kind of uh, module, and then intensity of focus through some of these exercises that we talked about. Um, and then we learned that we need to resist temptation as well, and that there's a number of strategies that we can kind of go and look up and figure out. But yeah, get off that junk food, digital junk food diet. So let's talk about how we're going to build deep work. So, like all other systems, there are two systems: a feedback system and an execution system, or a doing system, I think we call it. Take a look at this module if you're not sure what I'm talking about. So stage one, we're going to identify one task that requires deep work, break the task down into its component parts. Again, similar to what we talked about in execution, identify a time and place that we'll be doing it, and sit and follow the steps from M1C2 execution part two, which is essentially set a timer, have the task in front of you, have the tools that you need, and don't have anything else. Yeah, there isn't a lot of change to this, but see how long you're able to focus. And if you got distracted, if you find yourself unable to focus, try some of the exercises from the intensity of focus training section above. So yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. Um, so you can do this with like reading. I'm obviously asking you to read a lot of stuff, and so just being able to do that is probably going to be challenging at first. But ideally, one thing what I'm trying to do with the reading is also develop that muscle, that mental muscle, to be able to focus for longer. So the reading is kind of giving you knowledge; it's also helping you train that muscle. Um, Stage two is schedule more deep work sessions till you start getting through them successfully, and you make progress you won't have gotten without a looming deadline. Um, yeah. So criteria for successful deep work session is you worked on what you had planned to do, and you suffered no distraction or little distraction during your session. Um, Yeah, don't worry about this too much. You will eventually figure out when you got into deep work or not. If you've never done deep work, then that's a really big thing. And then maybe just stick to kind of stage one until you want a lived experience of going and doing deep work that both felt good, kind of emotionally and intellectually, and then also produced work that you would have otherwise struggled to. And so you want that kind of experience here. And maybe I should write that here. Um, And then there's more stages kind of later. Stuff to know, you need rest. So take breaks. Some people get like super involved in deep work sessions and they don't kind of take breaks. So when you're working, you're like just like if you're working out, um, when you do a really intense workout, you need to give your muscles a break. Similarly, when you've done really hard intellectual work or really concentrated intellectual work, do need to give your brain a break. So walking is really good. Any kind of movement is really good. Um, yeah. At the end of the day, just stop working at some point. If you've done like three, four kind of deep work sessions, that's about it. Most people can't do more than that. Yeah, there's a checkout schedule that allows you to like kind of give your brain a rest for the evening. After the week, take breaks, accountability, have people who are holding you accountable. We'll do this in the apprenticeship as well. And so what we're going to do is kind of you're going to be logging your deep work hours in your notebook. So again, I think that's probably missing. Let me just comment that. Just having people to work with is really great as well. One thing we're trying to do with the kind of co-working sessions that we're doing is have this sense of accountability. And so the kind of setup of that session is in the beginning, you just say what you're going to work on. So you set your intention very clearly, then you have a timer, let's say for 30 or 40 minutes. You work on just on that task, and then at the end you kind of review. So that's what we're trying to build with that kind of co-working sessions as well. Um, Finding the deep work. This is how you find deep work. Yeah, like checking emails is fine. You need to do that, but it's not really deep work. It'll still be good to be focused and just get through that task. Um, but yeah, this section will help you talk about kind of where uh where you can find those tasks. Okay, some mindsets which are really important. Don't be hard on yourself. If you're struggling, that's fine. Um, your muscles are in the condition they're in. There's nothing to be there's no, yeah, that's just where you are. Don't be hard on yourself. Be curious. It's a process, and that you might go days or weeks without deep work. Each session won't be perfect. But the goal here is to build a system so we can kind of do deep work through our lives. And honestly, once you start getting kind of flow states through deep work, it just like work becomes so much fun and almost like borderline addictive. You just, yeah, need to use your muscle. Like once you've started working out, again, I think there's so many parallels there, but once you start working out and you know how great it is to work out and how awesome you feel once your body is tired and like, spent, um, the same thing will happen kind of with your brain and your intellectual kind of capability. You'll want to use it and you'll feel like a little bit restless when, your brain isn't working, and so you will seek out kind of naturally ways to do deep work. And at that point, you're set, right? Like that's why the biggest kind of metric that we track during the apprenticeship is the amount of deep work hours you're getting. Because once your muscle gets to, like your brain gets to a certain point, and you have like a lived experience of using it to do cognitively challenging work that's enjoyable and then produces also really good work, like you'll be set. You'll keep chasing that feeling, and inevitably, kind of great work will follow. Um, so be patient. Yeah, the first goal is to try and do some deep work and feel a sense of satisfaction and joy from it. We want to feel kind of joy and not fear as the basis of doing our work, and that will kind of just change our relationship with work completely. So be patient, train your mind, and keep trying. It will happen. There's no way it won't happen. Embrace experimentation. So there's many different ways you could do it. Again, your feedback system will help you do this experimentation. If you're not getting flow states, hopefully your feedback session system will tell you why, and you can make experiments. For example, for me, I was trying to write in the evening or the afternoon, and my brain was already tired by then, and there was no point. So normally I try to write as early in the day as I can, and I find that I'm much more effective then. But again, this will change. Don't try to do more than 3, 4 hours a day. It's a lot. Um, yeah, again, if you manage to do this much work, you'll find that your brain itself is tired. It's a great feeling, much like the one you get physically after a great workout. Um, Call it a win. Don't try to like squeeze a lot more. And yeah, if you're doing a lot of deep work, make sure you're getting enough exercise because that will really help kind of rest and recharge your brain. And so then, naturally this will go to physical health. So kind of take a look at that if you're doing a lot of deep work. There's an advanced deep work module that will come sometime in the future. But for now, hopefully you've understood what deep work is and why we do it. Deep work is approaching or doing cognitively challenging work in a focused state that's not born out of fear, that is also giving you kind of a sense of timelessness and total involvement when you're doing. So that's what deep work is. The reason we do it is because you produce fantastic work. It strengthens your mental muscle, and it's inherently enjoyable. And all of these things are fantastic, obviously, to have. This is the practice. This is how we do it. We have time and we have intensity of focus. Um, we want to avoid distractions and basically like play with our deep work system until we figure out how we can get more of it. And we kind of realize that this is a long-term pursuit. And so little kind of setbacks and things along the way is something that we understand as a part of the process. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. You can read the Deep Work book by Cal Newport if you'd like to. There's some things in here that he didn't quite cover in the way that I have, but he's like the original kind of purpose person who put it together. And again, like deep work sessions are the most important kind of metric that we're tracking. It's the most important thing we're trying to do. It's just get into this habit of doing deep work. Once we get into the habit of doing deep work and we enjoy it and we crave it, like we will do great work. And there's really nothing that's going to stop us. So it's really crucial that we build this system. So that's why there's a second system that we built. Okay, hopefully that helps. Go read the thing, and yeah, message me or hit me up if you have any questions.